Hello, and welcome to a quick playthrough of Normandy Solitaire D-Day to Falaise 1944. I'll explain some of the rules and I'll explain how to use the Vassal module. So what I've got here is I've got Vassal in full screen mode and I've got rid of the taskbar at the bottom, so you almost get the whole, certainly the whole of the important part. You can't quite see the tables, and that's through doing fit width, and then I normally scroll into 40% to see the kind of most of the action takes place around here in the early part of the game, so that's okay. Then when you want to see the three resource tracks, we have transport, supply, Hitler approval, and they begin at 5, 4 and 6 respectively. You can push those up through die rolls and they tend to go down through, well, supply gets spent, Hitler approval can go down through the cards and through losing battles on defense. Supply you spend, transport goes down through the cards as well. Transport is used to move units from in transit to strategic reserve and from the map to strategic reserve. Supply you spend points to attack using armoured formations, and Hitler approval you need to move out of the strategic reserve onto the map, and also to roll if you want to dissuade the mustachioed one from doing something stupid in terms of the Hitler intervention cards. We'll see one or two of those later. Basically, Hitler orders you to do certain attacks, and you may or may not want to do them, and you need to roll on here and pass a check here in order to wriggle out of having to do something you don't want to do there. If you want to pass a transport check, it's less than or equal to 5. Supply would be less than or equal to 4. Hitler approval would be less than or equal to 6. That would be automatic to begin with. Obviously, as these drop, it gets harder and harder to pass those checks, and that means it gets harder and harder to do things as the game progresses, because these do tend to get perilously low as the game goes on. So, looking at some of the buttons on the toolbar at the top, there's some game markers in here. These tend to be mostly the attack and defense modifiers. We've got some siege markers, fortified villages. I think I actually need to add more of those. But for now, you can clone them, because it is possible to actually get more than 4 on the board. So maybe I'll add some more of those, but they can be cloned. The DRM markers apply to these things. Certain cards will give you a plus or minus modifier on those resource checks, which makes those resource checks easier or harder to pass. And these things get added to the tracks when there's bad weather. One for these two, and that kind of models the idea that when the Allied air forces are grounded, you can take advantage of that in terms of being able to move stuff around a bit easier, or move supply in a bit easier, so that these give you the +1 on the augmentation rolls. Try and increase these. So there are two types of roll. Augmentation roll when you want to get this up, and you have to roll higher than the number on the counter, which is 3 to begin with, but Hitler can get flipped to 4 once the Hitler assassination card is drawn. So that's an augmentation roll, rolling higher than these numbers, and a check is rolling less than or equal to its current level. So that's basically the difference between the two rolls. What else is there in game markers? This reserve action. You can put actions into reserve up to 2 to save them for later. That also has a reverse side. There's some siege markers. We'll go through the siege rules later. And then there's the 4 commanders, Wittmann, Model, Rommel, and Kurt Meyer, who was the commander of 12th SS. So they all come into play at various times through event cards. Model only comes in right near the end in the final deck. He only took commander in Normandy near the end, so he could come into play a little bit earlier, but normally he comes in quite late. Okay, so Allied markers. We have markers for the Yarbos, the fighter bombers, the carpet bombing, and some Allied commanders, Montgomery and Patton. There are 2 Patton counters because, to begin with, US Third Army is split into its 2 component corps. These 2 let's have a look at that. We've got US 15th Corps, which will begin in Rennes, and US 8th Corps, which begins in Saint-Malo when Third Army is activated. And so if pattern is drawn as a card when these are split, you can get basically you'll get the markers put on both because they're both under Patton's command. The thinking there is that, you know, Third Army Command and Staff Headquarters and Patton and all that kind of stuff will have a positive influence on both of them. But that will be much later in the game. We're not going to see that today. I'm only going to run through a few turns. Eliminated units. If you have a unit that's eliminated, you can just right-click and eliminate it. I'm not going to do that just yet. And these are the German reinforcements. So we have the Panzer divisions, Kampfgruppen that come on by card later in the game, a couple of Fallschirmjäger divisions, the Nebelwerfer rocket artillery, and the 88mm flak. All of these units, except the flak units, can attack and defend. The flak units can only be used on defense, to defend a space, which kind of makes sense if you think about it, because these are sort of anti-tank units, so they're sort of tended to be kind of hidden away in strongholds and under trees and bushes and that kind of stuff, and be used as in a defensive role to take out the Allied armour. Now the event cards, we have add early deck, add mid deck, add late deck. To begin with, there are only 2 cards, because the first 2 cards are seeded. So we can see the first one. In order to draw a card, you just drag it across from the draw card to the discard pile, and then what I would normally do at that point is actually drag it across to the map. There's a Control S to increase the size of it. So I tend to put it into its bigger size. Oops. And actually, it kind of, by a strange coincidence, just rather nicely fits into this sequence of play box, which sort of doubles up as a card box and happens to be right near where you kind of need things, which is near where all the action is. So I tend to leave it there. The good thing about the large size, you don't need to hover over it. The good thing about the large size is even at that size there, even if you zoom out, you can still read the card very easily. So when you're allocating reinforcements and so on, it's pretty easy to read. So here, the first, we work our way down the card in order in these 4 phases. And in fact, if you actually look at the sequence of play, draw event card, and then resources, air power, allied advances, and actions phase. And these are the 4 sections of the card. The housekeeping phase is very short. It'll remove some markers at the end. It doesn't really have a need to be on the cards. And the first thing that you would do is do this resources phase, and that usually consists of 3 things. Moving reinforcements onto the board from the German reinforcements placeholder, window, whatever you want to call it. Allocating any markers which are in red. In this case, there is. Should I put these back? When you want to return to the marker pool, you can just put them back like that, and they'll go back in here. And there they are. In this case, there's a -1 DRM for transport, and that basically is just there to ensure that the transport checks on the first turn always succeed, because you know there were a couple of Panzer divisions quite close to the beaches, and they didn't really need to go anywhere, so they shouldn't be constrained by the in-transit rule, which I'll come to in a minute. So the first 2, Panzerlehr 12th SS, what you do is you just take your units, you put them into in-transit to begin with. Panzer divisions always start in transit. Everything else goes straight to either the strategic reserve or the map. And the in-transit box is basically a placeholder that represents units that are moving from other parts of the country, other parts of the Western Front. Most of them would have been stationed in other parts of France, southern or southwest France, and had to kind of trundle their way through the country to get to Normandy, which would sometimes take several days because of Allied air power or partisans or wrecked trains or lack of trucks, whatever. It would take a long time to move a whole Panzer division from one end of France to the other. So they go into here, and depending on the state of your transport infrastructure, they can then either move into the strategic box straight away, ready for deployment, or get stuck here, which means they're kind of somewhere in the middle of France. But as I say, on the first turn, these two units were quite close, so they automatically go into the strategic reserve. Now you would normally do that in the player action phase, but I'll move them in there straight away now. The -1 DR transport, we've done air power. There is none. The weather was pretty grotty on D-Day. There weren't very many sorties flown, and what sorties were flown were completely ineffective against the German beach defences. So there's no air power on the first two turns. D-Day landings first wave or second wave, which was card 2, and then the Allied advances section shows which of the armies will advance. In this case, all 3. Now the rule for D-Day landings is very, very simple. I've kept this to the simplest abstraction so we can get on with it and not have lots of complicated sub-rules and a sub-game for seaborne invasions and losses and German defences and all that kind of D-Day stuff. I wanted to keep that as quick and simple as possible because we want to get on with the Normandy campaign. So all you do is you roll for each of the 3 armies, and if you roll what's on these start boxes, 1 or a 2 in the case of the US and 1 for the other 2, they'll get stuck in their start box for an extra turn and then come ashore. That kind of represents a bit of a delay, such as it occurred at Omaha. So we roll all 3, 2, so that's failed, 6, that's passed, and 2, that's passed. Quite often you get these, the British and Canadian, or actually they are actually to begin with, First Corps and 30 Corps, they will quite often get ashore, and the Americans sometimes don't. So this is not that unusual, an opening where these get ashore and the Americans have been delayed a bit. That represents the difficulty, shall we say, that the American First Army had at Omaha Beach. Now what that means is Carentan is the weakest. Normally I would move a unit into Carentan to defend it, but because the Americans are going to need another card next turn to get there, I've got a bit of breathing space. I've got one action. I can bring one guy ashore, so I'm going to move Panzer into Lebacy Wood to defend against First Corps. And to begin with, British Second Army had the 2 Corps landing. This was an entirely British 30 Corps, and this was made up of British and Canadian formations. Later in the game, when the Canadians are activated, this becomes British Second Army, and that becomes 1st Canadian Army. But for the moment, it's 30 Corps and 1st Corps, and they will move along the British track. They will move along the Canadian track. That's just a sort of a historical kind of footnote, and that's the end of my turn. So my one action, I moved Panzer across to Lebacy Wood. So very quick, and then we can move on to turn 2. But before we do that, we want to move the event card back into the discard pile. You just drag it across, and then you drag the second card across. First 2 cards are always cards 1 and 2, as I said before, because that's the D-Day landings. So D-Day landings, second wave. There's some stuff here to look at again. Lose one. So Hitler approval goes down 1. This is quite common to lose stuff on the cards, and they'll gradually be depleted. Hitler's mood already starting to depreciate, presumably because he's not happy with the Allies getting ashore. -1 to -1 to Hitler approval, so we can just move that across. So although he's going down because he's not happy, you can automatically move this across. So when I moved Panzer across, I should have done a Hitler check, but because he's on 6, I didn't need to do that. Normally you've got to roll less than or equal to the Hitler approval level. With a -1 DRM, it'll be again automatic. No reinforcements this turn, and we do have a +1 attack strength on the US First Army, so we just drag the marker across, put that on there. Flip it over to +1, and let's go back to the larger size. So he's got this +1 attack strength. Because he's attacking an empty beach box and it's automatic, that is actually not going to be of any interest. Had he been in here, though, he'd have got that +1 and attack these guys with a +1 modifier, or +1 attack strength when you're calculating the attack value. Meanwhile, we have, so the first US advance there, we can get rid of that now. It's an attack modifier, so it's not going to be used. Return that. There are no modifiers to the British or Canadians, so they're going to be attacking with 0 strength. These are defense strengths, not attack, so it's going to be 0 for attack. The reason this is not used in as an attack value as well is because I did have attack value plus dice versus all the defense value plus a die, But it turned out that the kind of these attack values and a die on defense were more or less negating each other, so I decided to keep it as simple as possible, have one less number to add up, one less die to roll, and it works really well. All the firepower comes from the markers that you add to this, the commanders, the stuff on the cards, artillery, naval gunfire, Montgomery pattern, and of course the Allied air power, which is very strong when it gets going. And that is often enough to take out a strong position like this. Here it's going to be difficult because it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 1 for the town, which is on the map key. So a town is a defense value of 1, so that's 7, so it's 0 against 7. A 6 is always a success though, so although a die roll can't actually be higher than the defense value, a 6 is always a success. So they're rolling for a 6, they do not get it. Same for the Canadians, nothing against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and 8. Hilly's worth 2. Oops. Let's do that one again. And 2 so the Canadians haven't made it either. Now you have to take a loss every time you are attacked, regardless of the outcome. And the reason for that is I experimented with lots of different lose 1, and if you win the battle, don't lose any if you win it, or lose 1 if you win the battle, lose 2 if you. And none of it worked. It was always either too strong for the Allies or too strong for the Germans. This is the one that worked. So a steady attrition, and that basically means that you have to focus completely on avoiding these losses as much as you can, because if you take a hit every turn, you're just going to run out of units. So this is the sort of central theme of the game, is managing and restricting, reducing those drip attritional losses as much as you can. And there are various ways and means of doing that, of course. But on this occasion I've taken the loss from the Panzer units because they can be rotated out and refitted, the other units can't. So to begin with, when you've got plenty of resources and it's relatively easy to move Panzer units around compared to late in the game, it kind of makes sense to take the losses on the 2 Panzer units. Now it's my turn. I get 3 actions this turn, and we'll see that now. So what I can do is move him out, and he'll need a 5. He doesn't get it. That's the second time I failed. Let's try that again. This time he succeeds. That's 2 actions gone, and I can move him in to replace him, and I will need a 6 or less because the DRM, so that's automatic. So what I've done there is move a weakened unit out and a full strength unit back. They've rotated, and next time I would have been able to do it this time if I'd had another action, but it took 2 to get him out because the transport check failed. What I'll be able to do next turn is flip him back to full strength, but that costs an action and I have no more actions. So that's the end of turn 2. Make the card a bit smaller, drag it back across the discard deck, and now we add the early deck in and shuffle. Must remember to shuffle, and once that's done, there are 22 cards in the deck, so there's a 24 card early deck. 2 are already played, and now we're in random territory. So the first card drawn is V1 flying bombs, and this is most of the cards fall into the category, they're not marked as such, but they kind of either are very much cards that favour the Allies, cards that favour the Germans, and some cards are a bit of both. They have kind of good stuff for the Germans, or bad stuff for the Germans, and good stuff for the Allies, and bad stuff. There's a mixture, so they're kind of not really either. This one, I would say, probably falls into the category of a bit of a mixed bag. We've got 2 armies advancing, quite a bit of air power, but Hitler goes up 2, and this is because he's extremely excited about the possibility of the V1 flying bombs being launched at London. The V1 campaign began around about this time during the Normandy campaign. But the next thing is to roll for, we've gained 2 there, so Hitler's back up to maximum on the Hitler approval table, or track. Air power, we roll 4, and we roll on the weather table to see how much air power is actually going to be available. So let's zoom into that. And if we do that, we can see that there are 3 possible outcomes. If you roll a 1, then the Allies don't get any of their air power. If they roll a 2 or a 3, they'll just get the 1 Yarbo, and 4 or 6, they get all of them. Now, since there are 2 on this card, if I were to roll a 1, I wouldn't get either of those. If I were to roll a 2 or 3, only the Canadians would get their Yarbo and the British wouldn't. And if I roll a 4, 5 or 6, that is basically good weather, and all of the air power will be available. So let's roll, and we get a 4. So on this instance, both the British and, it says British and Canadians, I'm not going to use the terms 30 Corps and 1st Corps, I'm just going to call them the British and the Canadians, which is their tracks. The British and Canadians both get their Yarbo markers, so they get a little bit of help on attack here. And then there they are. Let's go back down to, yeah, let's leave it at that actually. So then British and Canadians both advance. So they've got this attack value of 1 now versus 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Still going to need a 6. Don't get it. That's 1 against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Still going to need a 6. Ah, they get it. So now I'm going to remove that as the loss. And over here, I have to retreat because I lost. He rolled a 6. The air power didn't make any difference on this particular occasion. That card just happened to be drawn at a time when it isn't going to matter. So the British First Corps advances in, and I have to take a loss now. I don't want to lose a Panzer division. I can't reduce him because he's already reduced, so I'm going to have to take a loss from somewhere else. So I'll flip the flak unit over. And because we had a Panzer retreat, a retreat involving mechanized forces, that means a reduction of 1 to Hitler approval. So that was a bit unfortunate. Playing an actual game here, that would be bad news because you want to hold the 31st Corps in Lebacy as long as possible to build up forces here, because when this gets attacked, it'll go into a siege mode. The siege rules will kick in because it's a fortress, and you want that siege to last as long as possible and tie down these guys for as long as possible to allow you to kind of focus on the other 2 fronts. That's going to make that a bit more difficult now. So now I get my 3 actions, and now this is an example where life starts to get a bit more difficult. I don't get any reinforcements. I've got 1 unit in the strategic reserve, and I'm going to flip him straight away. Control F will flip, or you can right click and flip. And you can see actually on there, I think it says Control F, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. So that's 1 action. With my second action, I'm going to want to move him into Caen. I'll need to pass a Hitler check for that. 5, just about. Now, I'd normally move this out to rotate, but given that there's going to be a siege situation, I'm tempted to leave him there. So I've taken 2 actions already. 1 to flip the unit, refit, action. 1 to deploy from the strategic reserve. I have 1 action left. Now, what I could do is counterattack and force him back to buy myself more time to get my siege defences in place. Caen is a very important space on the map. If you lose it too soon, you can be in big trouble. Now he'll have a defence of 2 plus 1 plus 2. That's 5, and I can attack with 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's 5 against 5. I'm going to do that. This is going to cost me a supply point because I've got to have mechanised forces in the attack. When mechanised forces attack, it costs a supply point. And I've got 5. He can't attack because he's a defensive unit. The naval Werfers and the Panzers can. So it's 5 against 5. Anything but a 1 will do. And I get a 3. So you leave the Yarbo on there because he's available on defense as well. They all go back there now. I can put him back because that's the end of the turn. And these guys move in here. So I've recaptured Lebacy Wood. That'll buy me a bit more time. And oops. And because that's a win, any advance by the Germans, Hitler approval goes back up again. So it went down because of a Panzer retreat, and it's only a Panzer retreat, not all retreats. But any attack, any advance, and Hitler's happy. So that puts him up by 1. Let's play 1 more card. Back to the event cards. Drag the card over. Oh, before I do that, let's put that one back. That's V1 bomb. So we got we're in card 4 now, and this is now this is interesting. This is a very early Goodwood, and basically would be extremely bad news for the Germans. An early Goodwood is always bad news. Why? Because Goodwood, apart from being a very powerful card in its own right, also causes the shuffling in of, let's just move that down a bit, shuffle in mid-campaign deck cards. So when we finish this turn, you will shuffle in the mid-deck, and that makes life a little bit more difficult, not least because the Hitler assassination card is in there. And coming on the back of this one, where I've just about to lose 2 anyway. Your position can quite drastically deteriorate very quickly if you're not careful. Normally in the middle of the game that would happen. I think maybe there's a case to be made for getting this card and getting that mid-deck in early. I haven't really thought about that. But the other thing is here we get a couple of modifiers, so +1 attack strength, and also Montgomery putting in his first appearance. And here's the Allied markers again, so let's move Montgomery over. And so it's +1 to the British and Montgomery with the Canadians. And now we're also possibly going to get some carpet bombing. Let's roll on the air power weather table again. So let's scroll across, look at the weather table, roll for that. It's a 3. That's partly clear, so 1 Yarbo will be available. If I go back to have a look, it would have been 2 to the British, but they only get 1 of those. So let's put that on the board. So the British will get this. And we also roll on the carpet bombing table because the card specifies carpet bombing, but because it's only partly clear with that first die roll, that has a DRM effect on the second roll on the carpet bombing table, and it says +1 DRM on the carpet bombing table if applicable, which it is. So we'll get a +1 here, and that's a 6. So in this case it's saying friendly fire, no attack, so there'll be no carpet bombing this turn. So both of these guys would have got carpet bombing modifiers of either +1 or +2 depending on that die roll, but because they rolled a 6, unfortunately it means they bombed their own troops rather than the Germans, which is not so good for them, not so bad for us. Now the attacks are going to be 2 here against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 again. 2 against 6. So this time a 5 will actually win because a 2 + 5 is 7, and that's great in the defence. So a 5 or 6, and it's a 3, so that's okay, but I've still got to lose 1. And Montgomery is 2 against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so he's definitely going to need a 6. Does not get it, so I can reduce that down. Maybe think about rotating these on my turn, which it is now. I get 2 actions, and what I'm going to want to do now for sure is rotate 1 guy out, and I think I want to do that. Yeah, because I want to leave them in there for now, because if they have to force to retreat, at least some of them would get back to Caen. Okay, this guy's left behind. Now I could move him forward with my second action. Yeah, I think I will actually. So I'm going to move him forward to boost the defences there. Because he wasn't participating in the attack, that flak unit, he kind of doesn't participate in the advance either, obviously. But you can pay for 1 action. You can move combat units 1 space. So any combat unit can always move a space. So I've paid 1 action. So that's my 2 actions. First action, I moved a reduced Panzer division out into the strategic reserve, ready to be refitted. So he's now in reserve. And with my second action, I moved the flak unit from Caen to Lebacy Wood, and there it says flak 88. Or 12th SS Panzer Division moves Bayeux to strategic reserve. Flak 88 moves Caen to Lebacy Wood. I really do like the way that Vassal logs the kind of spaces for you, and that's great when you have a log file to play it back if you need to do that. And I think we'll call it a day there. Just one more thing that I would do before we stop, and that is move the Goodwood card onto the discard pile and add in the mid deck. Make sure you shuffle, and now it says there are 32 cards, so that's 12 from the mid deck, and there were previously 20, so we're only on card 4, and so the first card drawn with the 21st Panzer counterattack. I'm not going to play this card. All the blue mid deck cards will be in there somewhere, so you move this across, and this card is actually not a particularly good card, although it says 21st Panzer counterattack. It weakens the British, which is why this card is modelling the sort of early 21st Panzer attack on around Bayeux, and because the British are weakened, that would give them a chance. But the rules state that you cannot attack units in the beaches after turn 2, and it is now turn 5. So none of these units can be attacked. So that's about it for now. I'm not going to play this card. Where we are, it's still early days, but 5 turns in. Not a bad start. None of the Allied units have advanced much past the beaches yet. We haven't taken any losses. Some units are depleted. resources aren't too bad. I mean, that gives you a flavour of the game, but it doesn't. I mean, we really have no idea yet how this game's going to pan out because we're only 4 or 5 cards in. So I'll call it a day. Thanks for watching, and catch you next time. Goodbye.